Imagine coming home to find police cars in your driveway because someone called 911 on you for locking your own pool. But here's the kicker. The person who made that call wasn't just anyone. It was Karen Mitchell's son, the same Karen, who'd been terrorizing her neighborhood as HOA president for 3 years. What started as a simple property dispute became a legal nightmare that exposed corruption, forgery, and a conspiracy that went straight to the top of our homeowners association. By the time this was over, the real criminal wasn't who anyone expected. This is my story, and trust me, you won't see the ending coming. My name is David Chen, and for 12 years, I thought I knew what peace looked like. It was my backyard, pool on Maple Grove Lane, surrounded by the privacy fence I'd built with my own hands, where my kids learned to swim and my wife Sarah hosted her book club meetings. That peace shattered on a Tuesday morning in June when I found 20-year-old Brandon Mitchell floating on an inflatable unicorn in my pool. "Excuse me," I called out, my coffee mug trembling in my hand. "What are you doing in my pool?" Brandon looked up with the entitled smirk that runs in the Mitchell family. "Relax, dude. Mom said it was cool. Something about community property. Or whatever, Mom." Karen Mitchell, the woman who turned our quiet neighborhood into her personal kingdom, since becoming HOA president. The woman who fined elderly Mrs. Peterson $50 for her rose bushes being 3 inches too tall. The woman who made my life hell for installing solar panels without her precious approval. "Your mother has no authority over my private pool," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Please get out." That's when Brandon pulled out his phone and started recording. "Actually, she does. This whole area has been rezoned as community space. Mom's got the paperwork." I felt my blood pressure spike. "That's impossible. This is my property. I have the deed." "Not anymore." He laughed, doing a lazy backstroke. "Better check your mail, neighbor." Inside the house, Sarah was going through our correspondence with shaking hands. Her face went white as she held up an official-looking document from the county clerk's office. "David," she whispered, "they're saying we never had legal ownership of the back quarter of our lot. They're saying the pool was built on HOA common land." The document was stamped, notarized, and looked completely legitimate. According to the filing, a surveyor had discovered that our property line was actually 15 feet closer to the house than our deed indicated. The pool, the deck, even Sarah's vegetable garden, all of it was suddenly community property under HOA management. My hands shook as I read the fine print. The document was dated 3 months ago. 3 months, and we'd never been notified. But there it was, signed by County Clerk John M. Morrison and witnessed by Karen Mitchell herself. "This has to be a mistake," I muttered. But Sarah was already pulling up our property records online. Everything matched. Our official lot size had somehow shrunk overnight, and according to the county's website, it had been that way since we bought the house. That afternoon, I marched over to Karen's pristine white colonial with its perfectly manicured lawn and garden no marmy. She answered the door with that practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "Oh, David, I was wondering when you'd stop by. I see Brandon's enjoying the community pool." "Karen, this is insane. That's my pool. I paid for it. I maintain it. And I have 12 years of property tax records proving that land is mine." She examined her perfectly painted nails with fake concern. "Well, that's awkward. You see, the county survey clearly shows otherwise. I'm afraid you've been paying taxes on land you never actually owned. But don't worry, as HOA president, I'll make sure the community gets full use of the amenities. I want to see the original survey. I want to see the paperwork trail." Karen's smile faltered for just a moment. "I'm afraid all official documentation is handled through proper channels. You need to file a formal request with the county. Though I should warn you, disputing official records can be quite expensive." That evening, I called every lawyer I could find. Most wouldn't take the case. Property disputes with government entities were messy and expensive. But then I found Marcus Rodriguez, a scrappy attorney who specialized in municipal corruption cases. "Mr. Chen," he said after reviewing the documents, I've seen cases like this before. The paperwork looks legitimate, but the timing is suspicious. No one just discovers a property line discrepancy after 12 years unless someone's looking for it. So what do? We dig, and we hope we find what I think we're going to find. For 2 weeks, I lived in a nightmare. Brandon and his friends treated my pool like their personal water park. Karen started charging neighborhood kids $5 to swim in my pool. The HOA sent me a bill for pool maintenance fees and threatened to put a lien on my house if I didn't pay. But the breaking point came on a Saturday morning when I'd finally had enough. I went out to the pool area with a new chain and padlock, determined to secure what I still believe was my property. Brandon was there with 3 of his friends, beer cans floating in the water, music blasting. Party's over, I announced, starting to lock the gate. Dude, you can't do that. Brandon protested. This is community property. Watch me. That's when he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. Double quotes, yes. I need police at 1247 Maple Grove Lane. Some psycho is trying to lock me out of the community pool. I think he's having a breakdown or something. 20 minutes later, the police officer stood in my backyard while Brandon played the victim, and Karen arrived to mediate the situation. The officers looked at the county documents, looked at me, and shook their heads. Sir, we're going to have to ask you to remove the lock. According to these records, you're preventing access to HOA property. As I watched Karen's triumphant smile, I realized this wasn't just about a pool anymore. This was war. The next morning, I sat in Marcus Rodriguez's cramped office, my hands still shaking from rage and humiliation. The images were burned into my memory. Karen's smug face, as the police forced me to unlock my pool, Brandon's mocking laughter, Sarah crying on our back porch. They humiliated me in front of my own neighbors. I told Marcus, but more importantly, I know this is fraud. I just can't prove it yet. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying the county documents with a magnifying glass. The forgery, if that's what this is sophisticated, professional grade. But there's something odd about the notary stamp. He pointed to a small detail I'd missed. See this serial number? It's slightly off-center. And look at the date format. It's inconsistent with standard county clerk procedures from that time period. So, what's our next move? We're going to need expert help, and we're going to need to move fast before they realize we're onto them. That afternoon, we hired Patricia Walsh, a forensic document examiner who testified in dozens of fraud cases while she worked her magic on the paperwork. I started my own investigation. If Karen was willing to go this far, there had to be other victims. I started with Mrs. Peterson, the elderly woman with the tall rose bushes. When I knocked on her door, she looked terrified. "Oh, David, I can't talk to you," Karen said. "If I discussed HOA business with troublemakers, I could face legal action." "Mrs. Peterson, I think Karen's been lying to all of us. Has anything strange happened with your property recently?" She glanced around nervously, then whispered, "She's been asking questions about my fence line. Said there might be an encroachment issue with my garden shed, but that shed's been there for 30 years. My blood ran cold." "Have you received any official documents? Anything from the county?" "Not yet, but she said I might need to adjust my property usage soon." I left Mrs. Peterson's house with a growing suspicion that my case wasn't isolated. Karen was working her way through the neighborhood, targeting anyone who'd ever opposed her reign of terror. 2 days later, Patricia Walsh called with explosive news. "David, you need to sit down for this. The documents are definitely forged." But that's not the shocking part. I ran the paper stock through spectrographic analysis. It's not even the right type of paper the county clerk's office uses. But here's the kicker. I found partial fingerprints on the notary seal that don't match John M. Morrison. Whose are they? I can't say definitively without comparison samples. But I'd bet my career that belonged to someone with direct access to official county equipment. That evening, Marcus had even better news. I've been digging into Karen's background, and I found something interesting. Her brother-in-law, Robert Mitchell, works for the county clerk's office, assistant deputy clerk, with access to all the official stamps and seals. The pieces were falling into place, but we needed proof. Real, undeniable evidence that would stand up in court. That's when I remembered the security cameras. 3 months ago, around the time the fake survey was supposedly conducted, our neighbor across the street had installed a comprehensive home security system. If someone had actually surveyed our property, those cameras would have caught it. Tom Bradley was more than happy to help when I explained the situation. We spent 2 hours going through footage from the relevant time period, fast-forwarding through days of routine neighborhood activity. Then we found it. There, I said, pointing at the screen. Pause it right there. The timestamp showed to 4:47 p.m. on March 15th, the exact date listed on the fraudulent survey. But instead of county surveyors, the footage showed Karen Mitchell and a man I didn't recognize walking around my backyard with measuring tape and clipboards. That's not a county survey crew, Tom said, shaking his head. That's Karen and some guy in regular clothes pretending to survey your property. Can you enhance the image of the man with her? Tom adjusted the camera settings, and the man's face became clearer. He was tall, thin, with the same sharp features as Karen and Brandon. I'll bet you anything that's Robert Mitchell, I said, her brother-in-law from the county clerk's office. We had them, but Karen wasn't done with her games. The next morning, I found a certified letter in my mailbox. A cease and desist order demanding that I stop harassing HOA officials and threatening legal action if I continued my campaign of intimidation. The letter also included a new bombshell. Karen was claiming that I'd threatened her son Brandon during the pool incident, and she was considering filing assault charges. This is getting desperate, Marcus said when I showed him the letter. They're trying to discredit you before we can expose them, but desperate people make mistakes. He was right. That afternoon, Karen made the biggest mistake of her life. She called a mandatory HOA meeting to address ongoing security concerns and property disputes. Every homeowner was required to attend, she said, or face fines. But what Karen didn't know was that I'd already contacted half the neighborhood. Mrs. Peterson had found her courage. Tom Bradley was furious about being manipulated, even quiet. Mr. Yamamoto from the corner house was ready to stand up to Karen's tyranny. As we walked into the community center for what would be the most explosive HOA meeting in Maple Grove Lane history, I had no idea that we were walking into a trap, or that Karen had one final ace up her sleeve. 3 weeks later, I sat in Judge Patricia Hendricks' courtroom, my heart pounding as Karen's attorney, a sharp-suited man named Gerald Voss, delivered his opening statement. Your Honor, this is a simple case of a property owner who refuses to accept legitimate government documentation. Mr. Chen has resorted to harassment, intimidation, and now frivolous litigation to avoid accepting the truth about his property boundaries. I watched Karen sit primly at the plaintiff's table, playing the role of the innocent HOA president being persecuted by an unreasonable neighbor. She'd actually sued me, claiming defamation and harassment after our explosive HOA meeting where I publicly accused her of fraud. But Marcus was ready. Your Honor, he began, what we have here isn't a property dispute. It's a criminal conspiracy involving forgery, fraud, and abuse of public office. By the end of this trial, the evidence will show that Mrs. Mitchell and her brother-in-law Robert Mitchell fabricated official county documents to steal our client's property. Judge Hendricks raised an eyebrow. Those are serious allegations, Mr. Rodriguez. I hope you can back them up. We can, Your Honor, and we will. Gerald Voss called Karen as his first witness. She took the stand with practiced composure, spinning a tale of a concerned HOA president trying to resolve a legitimate property dispute. Mr. Chen became increasingly hostile when we discovered the survey error. She testified. He threatened my son, harassed me at my home, and spread malicious lies about me to our neighbors. All I ever wanted was to follow proper procedures. It was a convincing performance. Karen was good at this, but then Marcus began his cross-examination. Mrs. Mitchell, you testified that a county survey team discovered the property line discrepancy. Can you tell us the names of the surveyors who conducted this work? Karen hesitated for just a moment. I don't recall their specific names. The county handles those details. I see. And when exactly did this survey take place? March 15th. As documented in the official report. Marcus smiled. Your Honor, I'd like to present Exhibit A, security camera footage from March 15th, showing the defendant's property during the hours the survey allegedly took place. The courtroom fell silent as the large screen displayed Tom Bradley's security footage. There was Karen, clear as day, walking around my property with measuring tape alongside a man who was definitely not a county surveyor. Mrs. Mitchell, Marcus continued, can you identify the man in this footage? Karen's face went pale. That's not. I don't remember that specific. Would it help if I told you his name is Robert Mitchell, your brother-in-law, who works for the county clerk's office? Gerald Voss shot to his feet. Objection. Counsel is badgering the witness. Overruled. Judge Hendricks said sharply. I want to hear the answer to that question. Karen's voice was barely a whisper. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The courtroom erupted. Judge Hendricks banged her gavel for order, but I could see the shift in the room's energy. Karen had just admitted guilt without saying a word. But the real fireworks came when Marcus called Patricia Walsh, our forensic document examiner. Ms. Walsh, what did your analysis reveal about the county documents in question? Patricia spoke with scientific precision. The documents are sophisticated forgeries. The paper stock is wrong. The notary seal impressions are inconsistent with official standards and most damaging. I found fingerprints on the seal that don't match County Clerk John M. Morrison. And whose fingerprints are they? Based on comparison samples obtained through legal discovery. They belong to Robert Mitchell. Gerald Voss tried to object, but the damage was done. The evidence was overwhelming. Then Marcus dropped his biggest bombshell. Your Honor, I like to call a surprise witness, Robert Mitchell. I hadn't expected this. Neither had Karen, judging by her shocked expression. Robert Mitchell shuffled to the witness stand looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Mr. Mitchell, Marcus began, do you work for the county clerk's office? Yes. And do you have access to official county seals and notary equipment? Robert glanced desperately at Karen. Yes. Did you help create fraudulent county documents? Claiming that David Chen's property line was incorrectly surveyed, the courtroom held its breath. Robert looked at Karen again, then at the judge, then at his own hands. I want to make a deal, he said suddenly. I want immunity in exchange for my testimony. Gerald Voss was on his feet screaming objections, but Judge Hendricks was fascinated. Mr. Mitchell, are you saying you have information about criminal activity related to this case? Yes, Your Honor, but it's not just about the Chen property. There are others. Mrs. Peterson, the Yamamoto family, 3 other properties on Maple Grove Lane. Karen's been planning this for months. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Karen was shouting at Robert. Gerald was trying to control his client, and I sat there stunned, realizing that this conspiracy was bigger than I had ever imagined. But then Robert said something that stopped everyone. Cold. And it wasn't just Karen's idea. Someone else was pulling the strings. Someone with a lot more to gain from these property seizures. Judge Hendricks slammed her gavel. Order. Mr. Mitchell, you will explain that statement immediately. Robert took a shaky breath. The real mastermind. It was suddenly, the courtroom doors burst open. 2 FBI agents walked in, flashing their badges. Your Honor, we need to stop this. Proceeding immediately, this case is now part of a federal investigation into municipal corruption. 2 months later, I sat in the same courtroom for what would be the final chapter of the most insane legal battle of my life. But now, instead of Karen Mitchell sitting at the defendant's table, it was County Clerk John M. Morrison herself. The FBI investigation had blown the lid off a corruption scheme that went far beyond one HOA president's power trip. John M. Morrison had been selling fraudulent property documents to the highest bidders, allowing people like Karen to essentially steal land from unsuspecting homeowners. The profits from the seized properties would then be split between Morrison and her conspirators. Karen, it turned out, was just the neighborhood face of a much larger operation. I never thought it would go this far. Robert Mitchell testified from the witness stand, his voice shaking. John approached me about 6 months ago. She said there was easy money to be made helping correct property discrepancies. She made it sound legitimate, but the real bombshell came when FBI agent Sarah Torres took the stand. Our investigation revealed that Mrs. Morrison wasn't working alone. She had a partner who helped identify target properties and provided the legal framework for the seizures. Someone who understood property law and could make the fraudulent documents look authentic. Judge Hendricks leaned forward, and who was this partner? Gerald Voss, Mrs. Mitchell's attorney. My blood ran cold. The man who'd been representing Karen in her legal battle had been part of the conspiracy from the beginning. He'd been feeding information back to Morrison about which properties to target next, using his position as an attorney to make their schemes look legitimate. The scope of the fraud was staggering. 15 families across 3 different neighborhoods had been targeted. The FBI estimated that Morrison and her conspirators had stolen over $2.3 million worth of property through their scheme. But here's where the story takes its final, most satisfying twist. Your Honor, Agent Torres continued, we were only able to uncover this conspiracy because of Mr. Chen's persistence. His refusal to accept the fraudulent documents and his thorough investigation provided us with the initial evidence we needed to build our case. Marcus leaned over and whispered, David, you didn't just save your pool. You saved 15 families from losing their homes. When the verdicts were read, the justice was swift and decisive. John M. Morrison was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for conspiracy, fraud, and abuse of public trust. Gerald Voss received 6 years and was disbarred. Robert Mitchell, who cooperated with the investigation, got 2 years probation and community service, and Karen Mitchell, she was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution to all the victims. Her precious HOA presidency was terminated, and the entire board was dissolved and reformed with proper oversight. But the most satisfying moment came when Judge Hendricks addressed me directly. Mr. Chen, I want to commend you for your courage in pursuing this case. Too often, citizens accept official-looking documents without question. Even when something doesn't feel right, your willingness to fight back exposed a serious threat to property rights in our community. 3 months later, I was floating in my pool, watching my kids practice their cannonballs, while Sarah grilled burgers for a neighborhood barbecue. Mrs. Peterson had brought her famous potato salad. Tom Bradley was manning the music. Even quiet Mr. Yamamoto was there with his family, laughing as his daughter splashed in the shallow end. The real estate agent who'd appraised all the recovered properties told us that our home values had actually increased because of the case. Apparently, living in the neighborhood that exposed a major corruption scheme made us somewhat famous. In a good way. Brandon Mitchell had moved back in with his mother after her release on bail. Pending her sentencing, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that he'd gotten a job at a car wash and was actually trying to turn his life around. Sometimes redemption comes from the most unexpected places. The new HOA board asked me to serve as president, but I politely declined. I'd had enough of community politics for one lifetime. Instead, I volunteered to serve as the neighborhood's unofficial property rights watchdog, helping other residents spot potential fraud or abuse. Marcus Rodriguez became something of a local celebrity after the case, with 3 other municipalities hiring him to investigate similar corruption schemes. He sent me a bottle of champagne with a note that read, "To the client who turned a pool dispute into a federal case," literally. As I watched my neighbors enjoying the summer evening in our backyard, I reflected on the past year. What started as a simple trespassing issue had become a lesson in standing up for what's right, even when the odds seem impossible. The most important lesson: trust your instincts. When something doesn't feel right, when official documents seem suspicious, When authorities act inappropriately, when someone tries to intimidate you into silence, fight back, ask questions, demand proof, get a second opinion, because sometimes the person trying to steal your pool is just the tip of the iceberg. If you've enjoyed this story of justice prevailing against corruption, please subscribe to my channel for more true crime legal battles. And if you've ever faced property disputes or HOA abuse, share your story in the comments below. You never know who might need to hear that they're not alone in their fight. Remember, your property rights matter, your voice matters, and sometimes one person's refusal to back down can expose corruption that affects an entire community. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.